Boo! What it do, YouTube? Today on Boo Think, I'd like to, just have a quick discussion, or at least the first discussion, on the West's perspective on China. And as a fellow Chinese myself, I used to do business a lot in China. I have loads of local Chinese friends, and so I really want to have a conversation about this because there is a lot of misconceptions and propaganda that I think is worth discussing. So without further ado, let's check this out. This is a Joe Rogan podcast clip. The guest is Melissa Chen, What Americans Don't Understand About China. So let's see how this goes.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Right. And, right now also, like with the rise of China, they're also, starting to use, basically some form of, electronic tyranny, right? They're able to really censor the internet in a way that's been unprecedented. You can't access Facebook, Wikipedia, Twitter, none of these things that you and I can just, open on our...
Okay, first of all, I don't know this person. But just from that sentence alone, you can tell she's not really from China, or at least she doesn't understand what's going on. So, electronic tyranny, so to speak, in some sense, I guess you have to concede. But just know that China only opened up in the 1970s from communism and all of that, civil war. But even from the 1970s, China was just so far behind the West in terms of technology, in terms of culture. And, America might be a superpower now. But if you take away technology, you take away the head start they had, think about it. China has more land, China has more people, China has a longer history, right? So, in that sense, if you are a Chinese leader and you foresee how vital technology is, especially social network, search engines, how vital it is to the society in future, would you not want to protect your country from just being controlled by a foreign power? We talk about Facebook. How many times has Mark Zuckerberg been in court for stealing your information, right? So these are real problems that China predicted. Now, it is not that China does not have their own form of Facebook. They have Weibo, they have WeChat. They have their own technologies. One, of course, for the safety of their country, and two, is another factor that people need to realize. You hear a lot about the Chinese sweatshops and how these Western companies come and almost in a form of modern slavery, they kind of just, how do I say this? They kind of almost enslave these Chinese people, giving them no pay, just people committing suicide in factories and all of that. So in China, they had to ban these companies, these technologies that are very crucial to national security, and allow a kind of homegrown Chinese company to be able to compete in a global sphere. And they don't even try to compete because China itself is big. So it is not so much as tyranny as just national security. So,
our apps can be accessed in China. So the way they just like control information and now exporting those same tools to other authoritarian countries around the world, is that part to me is dangerous because
You see, so exporting it to other totalitarian countries. Now, the word totalitarian is too casually used. And again, they're doing that because they see the harm other countries see the harm that Facebook, that Google is bringing with their highly illegal means of stealing your information and using that as ads, and just, how can you allow the technology that almost runs your entire civilization to be controlled by the USA? You really have to have a bird's eye view, especially if you're in the US. Right, you really need to step out of the situation and think as a leader of these countries. And even as a citizen, you do not want just your society's most crucial technology to belong to a foreign power that just makes no sense at all.
I think both Faisal and I came to America with this all right, this is the place that we can finally be ourselves and think for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And we're starting to
see, I don't know how true that is. Because, I've spent time in China. I know a lot of Chinese people. And most of them respect their government. Right? And I'm not talking about just because of government propaganda. Listen. Since the 1970s, more than 770 million people have been lifted out of poverty, right? This isn't an accident, right? This is because they have a government that makes good decisions. I was in the Sichuan province, and I was going to the border of Mongolia to just dabble in the jade trade. And going through there, we have to go through mountains. First of all, in Malaysia, if you want to travel past the mountain, you go around it, as a lot of countries. In China, they have highways that go through hundreds of feet in the air. And every single street light, even in the mountains, they are all solar powered. Now, while Western democracy is arguing about gender pronouns and he, she, it, they are making decisions that are helping people and helping the environment. Listen, right? Bear in mind that China did not have the head start that the West had, right? In the history of China, just how much damage the West have done, not just in China, just in the entirety of Asia, in India, how they pillaged India, how even in China, how they kind of threatened war to make opium sales legal just to profit, right? I'm not bashing the West. If you're from the West, you are doing this for the good of your country, and that is understandable. But at the same time, understand that China is a different country with a different kind of cultural history. And so they require different kind of action to produce results. And this lady here I don't know, it angers me that there is this kind of ignorance, I guess, and I'm really hoping that she isn't speaking this way just so she can get on the Joe Rogan podcast. Because if you do, I'm sure there are polls, and most of the Chinese citizens, they respect the government because the government has shown results. It is as simple as that.
see that the whole world seems to be kind of going in the other direction.
So there was a shift in China, and the shift was initially a completely communist society, And now capitalism, at least in a monetary sense, is embraced.
Yeah,
And
market
so-
reforms, yes.
Yes. So there's this giant shift in what China actually is, which corresponds to this huge growth. Is it possible that in the future this shift could move on to other aspects of Chinese culture, like discourse or the way they view the government or even some form of democracy?
First of all, she's not the right person to answer this question. Neither am I, but I definitely have a more unbiased stance from wherever she comes from. So, yes, Communist Party of China, that's what they call it. But if you truly understand China, if you really spend time there, you realize that China is one of the most capitalistic countries in the world. To do business there, right, is by far, look, the rich and poor, the gap between the rich and poor there is so high. I'm sure if you pull up statistics, it's one of the highest in the world right now. Does that scream communism to you? Right? So, there is this undertone of this crazy Marxist, communistic kind of glow that is put onto China. But to tell you the truth, China is one of the most capitalistic places in the world right now. And bear in mind, right, the US only has about 400 years of history. China has 6,000, right? Under the monarchy, in terms of corruption, in terms of shady businesses, different kinds of business tactics, China more or less invented being an unscrupulous businessman. So don't, you need to stop being influenced by whatever the media is throwing at you. Communism and China was once a thing. It is the epitome of just capitalism right now.
That was what we expected.
That's what we expected.
That was the theory. But the way China has behaved now, they call it socialism with Chinese characteristics. That's the official name of this long-drawn game to, institute market reforms, usher in riches for the middle class, lift a lot of people out of poverty.
Yes.
But in a very controlled way, in a way that's like, see, that's the thing about like Asian culture that people don't understand. It's that there's a fundamental difference between the China dream and the American dream, right? And Xi Jinping has outlined what he thinks is the China dream. It's basically a top-down way to it's a goal, it's a national goal. And basically what they're trying to say is that, okay, we're going to lift a lot of people out of poverty, but your generation has to make sacrifices. It's not about the individual.
Okay. She's right. But don't talk about market reforms and all of that in such a negative tone. Because, first of all, do not forget that the West, the US, they didn't start from nothing. Okay? Put aside the fact that they pillaged and just encroached in the sovereignty of half of the world. Right? These European settlers massacred the Native Americans that were there, right? However, China in history were the victims, right? From the Empress, what's her name? I can't freaking, whatever, right? I can't get the name right now. But the thing is, socialism with a Chinese head or whatever she says, right? That basically means what they want to do is to allow leadership of the country to belong to the competent. First of all, democracy, yes, fine. It worked 100 years ago, right? I'm not saying, I'm not supporting the Nazis, anything like that, right? Tyranny is wrong. But the world is changing so fast. Right? Do you really believe that changing the leader of a superpower of the world every 4 years makes sense. I think, was it Murphy's Law or no, not Murphy's Law. Man, forget it. Technology, the capabilities of technology, it's doubling every 2 years. The pace of change is so fast that it's impossible for archaic democratic systems to keep up anymore, right? And China is run with the kind of motto of having the most qualified, right, the highest educated, the best in the field to run specific departments of the government. And if they're doing a good job, you know, their kind of plan of governance should not be short term. Nothing that is short term is better than something long term, right? So to critique kind of China's method, or how do you say, interpretation of democracy, really is just not conducive anymore, because while the West again is, you know, complaining about pronouns and I don't know, fat shaming and just ridiculous stuff like that, Chinese have leading scientists in the world solving problems, catching up, and they have already caught up, right? It's a fact that 5 skyscrapers are built every day in China. The biggest kind of construction projects are done daily in China, right? So to focus on the necessary evil of controlling billions of people, many of whom are uneducated and are super poor, the fact that they're able to in such a short time bring almost 800 million people above the poverty line to middle class says one thing: it works. And that's why the Chinese citizens recognize this, right? The West, they're not looking at Western democracy going, oh, we wish we had that. No, right? The fact of the matter is, the majority of the people look at Western democracy and laugh because it doesn't work anymore. I was doing my master's in Melbourne, and in the city center, there are still telephone lines hanging from lampposts. Now, right? How does that make sense? The fact is, there's so much barrier to change, barrier to action, that they aren't able to move. Oh man, this is such a long rant.
It's about building a strong China, and implicitly also about ensuring that the CCP stays in power, the Chinese Communist Party stays in power. But it's that you might have to give up, personal sacrifices for the sake of China, versus the American
for the
dream
sake of your
is
country.
Bottom up. It's about your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, pillage the rest of the world, own slaves that did all the dirty work, right? Lead the Industrial Revolution, destroy the ozone layer by your own, and then just suck the entire world out of the resources and then say, bottom up. The thing is, China had to go from nothing to something real fast for survival.
And if you do that, that's the American dream. And if you achieve a certain level of happiness, if you achieve, it's all it's bottom up. It's not centralized, and it's not something that the Chinese government is kind of trying to stuff down your throat. And China's willing to play the long game. So it is still a Leninist, Marxist government.
That is such a horrible thing to say. What are you talking about? Marxist government? The amount of millionaires that have come up right? It's just ridiculous. Like, Marxism is a version of communism that does not remotely apply to modern day China. And the fact that she can even put Marxism and that in the same sentence with China, man, this is what annoys me so much. Especially when it comes from someone who is seemingly Chinese. Like, how can you say this? You're talking about the long game like it's a bad thing. Of course, you're running a country of billions. You're not doing a freaking science project. You need to plan decades in advance, right? And the people need to work hard in order for your own country to prosper. Why are they talking about this in such a negative light? Absolutely ridiculous.
Xi Jinping still believes in all of that. That's why it's still so totalitarian. But
Shut up!
it's,
What?
you know, they know that like the way to gain power in the world is to get rich, and they did it on on the back of trade with other countries through very unfair practices, actually in many cases. So if you think about like how I think there are a lot of estimates of how much they've actually stolen from the United States in terms of intellectual.
Listen, talking about stealing, right? Let's discuss the fact that these Western powers decide, hey, let's use these people, enslave them for the cheap pay, and profit out of it. For the starting years of China, the entire world treated China as a sweatshop. Okay? Think about it, right? If someone comes to your country and then pays you shit with no benefits, no welfare, nothing of the sorts, just we're talking about a few cents US dollars a day. And people committing suicide in the factory by the dozens, okay? By the hundreds, by the thousands. So if you go and enslave a bunch of people, an entire civilization almost, what do you expect? They're going to make a way out. And the easiest way, the fastest way to do that is to learn from what they had kind of suffered in those sweatshops. Take that, innovate it, and then make a better life from themselves. Not even a better life, but just the lowest standard that you can imagine in America is what they aspire to get. Right? So don't talk about stealing technology, getting your technology stolen from a country that you practically enslaved for decades. This is, and again, this is from my conversations with very intellectual people who are local Chinese. Right? And these are opinions of my own as well, because man, it's just so frustrating seeing someone of obviously Chinese descent speak about China in such a Western brainwashed manner.
Property, corporate espionage. Now even like academia is being infected. So
How so?
they just arrested the head of the chemistry department at Harvard.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, but wasn't that didn't they think that guy was in connection with some weaponized? What's that?
The virus
article?
thing?
Yeah.
No.
Am I thinking of something else?
There was an article linking some Canadian researchers to the virus.
Right. That's what it
no,
was.
but this was different. The head of the chemistry department at Harvard was found to have lied about receiving money from the Chinese government. So there's this program called the 1,000 Talents program in China. Basically, they're offering a lot of money. The New York Times did a really good expose on this. They basically offer money to like academics, because it kind of sucks to be one here in the sense of like you're not paid that well,
Right.
but China's.
So how is that Marxist? How is that? The 1,000 Talents program is a real thing, and basically what they're trying to do is attract talent from all over the world and paying them what they deserve. to speak about that in a negative light is just preposterous, right? We talk about all the ways that China is improving in terms of, technology, in terms of raising poverty, in terms of improving the culture, all of that, right? These are legitimate steps that have been planned out over decades by people who are at the top of the academia, top of the field, with years and years of experience working on a single project to get their country and to get their citizens in a better place. All right, so how can you talk about giving people more money to work for you in a bad light and then call that communism?
Is dangling like a lot more money and say, okay, if you do research here in China, there's going to be like less bureaucracy. So that's their way to lure these people in. Right?
So he was hiding the fact that he was getting
hiding,
income from them?
Correct.
How was he hiding it?
He didn't report it.
I don't know about
And-
this
Did
case,
he put
by
it
the
in the
way.
bank anyway?
Right. And so at the end of the day, when there's a relationship there, China owns your research.
Right.
And if you're researching something sensitive, that's a big issue.
This was my brave opinion on China. And, the channel is called Boo, but I really wanted to start this to really have discussions and really consider the truths about important issues. And I think the Western perspective of China is very, very misguided, purposefully so. And, I just hope, especially if you're in the West, that you're able to kind of step outside. Ironically, Western propaganda, the rubbish from CNN, BBC, Fox News, etc. It's been clearly documented how they fake news, how they hire, actors to do interviews just to blast China. And, I just hope to encourage thought and really have just open conversation about things. So I know Boo Think episodes are rather long, but if you've made it to the end of the video, shouts out to you. Do like and subscribe. As usual, I'll wait. Hit the like button, subscribe. Have you done it yet? Okay. Well, anyway, thank you for your time. I hope you found this insightful, and we'll catch you all next time. Peace.